Emily Carter had imagined this moment 100 times. She lay back on the padded exam table in a softly lit clinic in Springfield, Illinois, her hands resting protectively over her stomach. The faint scent of antiseptic filled the air, mixed with a low hum of medical equipment. On the wall across from her, a framed poster showed a smiling mother cradling a newborn. Emily smiled too. In just a few seconds, she would see her baby for the first time. She reached for her phone, ready to record the screen so she could send the video to her husband, Mark. He had been disappointed he couldn't make it. Work emergency, he'd said. He always said that. It'll just be a moment, the ultrasound technician said cheerfully, squeezing gel onto the probe. Emily laughed softly. I've been waiting weeks. The screen flickered to life. Static at first. Then shapes. Emily searched for the excitement she expected to feel, the rush of joy she'd been promised by friends and movies. She opened her mouth to ask a question, and then she noticed the silence. The technician's smile stiffened. Her movement slowed. She adjusted the probe, then adjusted it again, her eyes narrowing slightly as she stared at the screen. Is everything okay? Emily asked, her voice suddenly thin. Yes, just one moment, the technician replied, too quickly. She excused herself and left the room. Emily's heart began to race. The seconds stretched. She stared at the ceiling, counting the tiles, telling herself she was being ridiculous. First pregnancies came with nerves. Everyone said that. The door opened again. This time, Dr. Harris entered. He was in his early 50s, calm and kind-looking, the sort of man who made patients feel safe without trying. But today, his expression was different, serious, guarded. Hello, Emily, he said, washing his hands. How are you feeling? Excited, she answered automatically. Is the baby okay? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned toward the screen, studying it intently. He adjusted the settings, leaned closer, and frowned almost imperceptibly. Emily's excitement curdled into dread. Doctor? She whispered. Dr. Harris finally turned to face her. His eyes didn't soften. Emily, he said carefully, lowering his voice, I need to ask you a personal question. She nodded, her throat tight. Are you safe at home? The question hit her like a slap. What? She laughed nervously. Yes, of course. Why would you ask that? Dr. Harris glanced toward the door, then back at her. He pulled up a stool and sat, his posture no longer clinical but human concerned. I know this is not what you expected to hear today, he said slowly. And I want to be very clear, I don't make statements like this lightly. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. Make what statement? He hesitated. Then he said the words that shattered everything she believed about her life. Based on what I'm seeing here, he said, tapping the screen gently, I strongly urge you to consider divorcing your husband. Emily stared at him, convinced she'd misheard. I'm sorry. She stammered. That's inappropriate. You don't even know him. I know, Dr. Harris replied. And I wish I didn't have to say this. But I've seen similar findings before. Too many times. Her hands curled into fists. This is a mistake. Mark would never hurt me. I hope you're right, he said quietly. But hope isn't a diagnosis. He printed the ultrasound images and handed them to her. The grainy black and white pictures trembled in her grip. What exactly are you saying? She asked, tears blurring her vision. I'm saying, he replied, meeting her eyes, that pregnancy often changes things. Stress increases. Control increases. And sometimes the body tells a story long before the mind is ready to hear it. Emily left the clinic in a fog. Outside, the sun shone brightly. Cars passed. People laughed. Life went on as if nothing had changed. But inside her purse, next to the ultrasound photos, sat a truth she didn't yet understand, one that would destroy her marriage. Or save her life. Emily couldn't sleep that night. The words of Dr. Harris echoed in her mind like a sinister whisper. You should consider divorcing your husband. She had clutched the ultrasound photos on the drive home, tracing the faint outlines of her unborn child with trembling fingers, wishing somehow that the images would erase the warning. But the fear clung to her like a shadow. She remembered the look in Dr. Harris's eyes, not judgment, not accusation, but urgent concern. He had seemed almost frightened, and that frightened her the most. The next morning, Mark poured coffee into Emily's favorite mug and leaned across the kitchen counter, smiling warmly. How was the appointment? He asked, his voice gentle, almost affectionate. Emily forced a smile. Fine, everything's fine. Mark reached over and took her hand. That's good. I can't wait to see our little one, he said, squeezing her fingers. His smile was so familiar, so normal, so perfect. She wanted to believe him. She had to. But every time she looked at him, a strange unease rose like bile in her throat. She noticed the small things she had once dismissed, the way he always knew where she was, the way he subtly criticized her decisions, the way he smiled at strangers while his eyes remained calculating and cold when she looked directly at him. Emily tried to convince herself she was overreacting. Maybe she had misread the doctor. Maybe she was imagining patterns where none existed. But the next day, she couldn't ignore the dread any longer. Emily returned to Dr. Harris's office, this time refusing to let herself be polite or hesitant. She needed answers. I need to know what you meant yesterday, she demanded, her voice trembling despite her attempt at composure. You can't just tell someone to divorce their spouse without explaining why. Dr. Harris leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. I was hoping you'd take my words seriously enough to pay attention without panicking, he said softly. But I understand why you're scared. And you should be, what? Why? What is going on? Emily pressed. He paused, carefully choosing his words. I see patterns in ultrasounds and in patients' medical histories that most people ignore. Signs of repeated trauma, stress that doesn't align with ordinary life. I've treated women who came in for routine appointments and ended up in emergency care, or worse because they didn't act when the first warning signs appeared. Emily felt a cold shiver run down her spine. You're saying, what exactly? I'm saying that your pregnancy is putting you at risk, he said quietly. Not because of the baby, but because of the environment at home. And I see signs that suggest this risk could escalate if nothing changes. Emily's mind reeled. Risk? At home? Mark? She shook her head, trying to push away the thought. It couldn't be true. He was kind, thoughtful. Everyone loved him. I don't understand, she whispered. Mark, he would never... I know, Dr. Harris said, his voice steady but grave. Most people think the same thing about their spouses. And most people are wrong. Emily left the office with a tight knot in her chest. Her car felt suffocating as she gripped the steering wheel, trying to slow her racing thoughts. The world outside moved as if nothing had changed, but inside her, a storm was gathering. For the first time, Emily began to notice the cracks in her seemingly perfect life. The way Mark had never let her handle finances alone. The way he subtly controlled who she spent time with. The little things she had brushed off as quirks or jokes. The doctor's words were no longer just an echo. They were a warning one that she could no longer ignore. That night, Emily stared at the ceiling, the ultrasound photos spread across her nightstand. A single thought kept repeating in her mind. If I don't act, I might not get another chance. And deep down, she knew that her life and her unborn child's might already depend on what she did next. Emily tried desperately to return to normal. She smiled at Mark at breakfast, laughed at his jokes, and made small talk as though nothing had changed. She followed the routines she had perfected over years of marriage, folding laundry the way he liked, keeping the kitchen spotless, always agreeing when he suggested something. On the surface, their life looked flawless. The neighbors still waved at them as they left for work, and Mark's friends continued to admire him as the doting husband everyone wished they had. But behind closed doors, Emily's perception was shifting. She began to notice details she had long dismissed, tiny cracks in the glossy image of their marriage that now seemed glaringly obvious. One evening, while Emily prepared dinner, she dropped a plate. The crash echoed through the kitchen. Mark's face changed instantly. His eyes sharpened. His jaw clenched. Really? He snapped, stepping closer than necessary. How could you be so careless? Emily froze. Her heart raced. She had dropped things before. He had never reacted like this. I'm sorry, she said softly, her voice trembling. Mark's expression soft in a blink, replaced with a charming, apologetic smile. It's okay. I know you're tired, he said, wrapping his arms around her. But Emily could still feel the tension lingering in his shoulders, the unspoken warning in his eyes. She realized with a sickening clarity that Mark's kindness was deliberate, a tool. He knew exactly when to smile, when to apologize, when to make her doubt herself, and now she could see it. The next day, Emily began to pay attention to her own body. She noticed bruises on her arms and shoulders that she couldn't explain. Small cuts on her hands that she had assumed were accidents. Frequent headaches and sudden spikes of anxiety that she had long chalked up to pregnancy hormones. Her curiosity, fueled by fear, led her to dig through old medical records, trying to connect dots she had once ignored. The patterns were subtle but undeniable. Unexplained injuries, chronic stress markers, and notes from previous checkups indicating tension and anxiety that had never been addressed. Emily's thoughts kept returning to Dr. Harris's warning. He had said her body was telling a story before her mind was ready to hear it. Now the story was becoming impossible to ignore. A few weeks later, during a routine prenatal visit, one of the nurses lingered after checking her vitals. She leaned in, her voice quiet but firm. Trust your instincts, Emily, she said. I've seen too many women ignore warnings. Don't be one of them. Emily felt her stomach drop. She nodded, her fingers gripping the edge of the examination table. The nurse's words confirmed what she had been afraid to admit. Something was wrong, and no one else could see it but her dad at home. Emily began to observe Mark more closely, noting the controlling patterns he displayed in subtle ways. He insisted on knowing where she was at all times, asked questions about her phone calls, and subtly criticized her interactions with friends. Small things, almost invisible to anyone else. But Emily noticed, and she remembered, for the first time, Emily started to imagine life without Mark not in a daydream, but as a serious possibility. She knew it would be dangerous. He was charming in public, respected in the community, and unpredictable in private. Yet the doctor's warning and the nurse's urging left her no choice but to consider that the man she had married, the man she had trusted completely, might be the very person who could harm her and her unborn child. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every sound in the house felt magnified. Mark's breathing, the hum of the refrigerator, even the creak of the floorboards. She replayed every memory of their marriage, looking for clues she had missed. The moments that had seemed insignificant, the sudden anger, the controlling comments, the dismissals of her feelings now felt like puzzle pieces. Emily realized, with a mixture of horror and determination, that the perfect marriage she had believed in for so long was an illusion. And if she wanted to protect herself and her child, She would need to uncover the truth hidden behind Mark's charm and fast. Emily couldn't stop thinking about Dr. Harris's words. Your body tells a story before your mind is ready to hear it. She had spent nights turning that phrase over in her mind, trying to convince herself she was being paranoid. But the bruises, the anxiety, the small, inexplicable injuries, they were all there. And now she knew she couldn't ignore them any longer. The next morning, Emily returned to Dr. Harris's office, determined to get answers. The sterile smell of antiseptic, the soft hum of fluorescent lights, and the muted chatter of other patients normally put her at ease. Today, though, the office felt oppressive. Every step she took toward the doctor's door made her heart hammer faster. Emily. Dr. Harris greeted her, his expression a mixture of concern and relief. I'm glad you came back. She swallowed hard. I need you to tell me exactly what you meant. The ultrasound, the warning. What did you see? He gestured for her to sit. It's not easy to explain, he began carefully. The ultrasound showed signs of repeated internal trauma, old injuries that were healing over time. They weren't caused by anything related to pregnancy itself. Your body is showing evidence of stress and harm that should never happen to a person in a safe environment. Emily felt her stomach drop, her hand tightening over her belly. Old injuries, but I don't understand. How is that possible? Dr. Harris looked her in the eyes. It happens more often than people think. Pregnancy can trigger subtle injuries to resurface, both physically and internally. In some cases, it's a sign that someone in the household has been harming the patient, even if it's not immediately obvious. Emily's mind raced. She thought of Mark, his charm, his perfection, the smiles he shared with friends, the subtle control he had over her life. Could he really be hiding something so dark? She shook her head, trying to push the thought away. But deep down, she knew she had already seen the cracks. Emily, Dr. Harris continued gently, I've treated women in situations like this. Most didn't realize the danger they were in until it was too late. Some ended up in the hospital. Some didn't survive. That's why I said what I did. Tears stung Emily's eyes. She had spent years believing in the perfect marriage, the perfect husband. But the images on the ultrasound, combined with the doctor's warning, shattered that illusion. Why now? She whispered, Why tell me this during the ultrasound? Because pregnancy changes the dynamics, he explained. Stress escalates, control escalates, and the risks to both mother and child increase. I had to give you the earliest warning possible. Emily left the office in a daze, clutching the printed ultrasound photos like a lifeline. Her car seemed to hum louder than usual, every sound amplified. Every moment with Mark suddenly felt like walking on a tightrope over a canyon. That evening, Mark returned home from work. He kissed her softly, asked about the appointment, and carried on as though nothing had happened. Emily forced a smile and nodded. She made dinner, poured wine, and laughed when he told a joke. Every gesture felt like a rehearsal, a mask she had learned to wear in his presence, but beneath the surface, a storm was gathering. Emily's mind was racing, cataloging every small moment she had once dismissed. The subtle criticisms, the controlling behavior, the sudden anger, the way he monitored her friends and family. She remembered the bruises she could never explain, the times she flinched instinctively, and the uneasy silence that followed small accidents. Emily realized, with growing horror, that the ultrasound hadn't just revealed a developing child. It had revealed the first warning signs of a life-altering truth, one she wasn't ready to accept. But one she had to. She lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. The ultrasound images spread out like a puzzle she was only beginning to solve. Her hands shook as she traced the contours of the black and white images. Somewhere in those shapes, the truth was hidden. And for the first time, Emily knew that uncovering it would not just change her life, it might save it. The perfect marriage she had believed in was an illusion. And Emily had finally realized that the person she had trusted most might be the very person who could hurt her the most. Emily couldn't sleep that night. Her mind raced, circling over Dr. Harris's words and the ultrasound images. Repeated trauma, signs of stress her body had recorded silently, injuries she couldn't remember, and the faint, cold suspicion she had tried to ignore, Mark. It began as a quiet, obsessive curiosity. She started digging carefully, discreetly, almost as though she were exploring a crime scene. First, she went through old phone bills and emails, searching for anything unusual. Then she scoured social media, looking for accounts she might have missed. Nothing seemed out of place. Mark's digital life was immaculate, polished, almost staged. But Emily knew perfection often hid something sinister. One night, she searched his name along with lawsuit, restraining order, and domestic. At first, she found nothing. Then, buried in an old archive court document from another state, she saw a name she didn't recognize, Rebecca Mills. The details were sparse. But it was enough. Divorce filed years ago, allegations of emotional abuse, and hints of something deeper, claims that had mysteriously been dropped or sealed. Her heart pounded as she searched further. She found a support forum for survivors of abuse. A post described a man who sounded exactly like Mark: charming, devoted in public, controlling in private. The woman who wrote it described bruises, emotional manipulation, isolation from family, and a carefully cultivated image that fooled everyone. Emily's hands shook as she scrolled. Each detail matched her own experiences perfectly. Every small controlling behavior, every subtle insult she had shrugged off, every moment of fear she had dismissed as overreaction, it was all part of a pattern. And then the realization hit her like a freight train. Mark wasn't just controlling. He had a history. He had done this before, and she might already be in danger. Her chest tightened. Memories flooded back, the times he had snapped at her for no reason. The way he monitored her every move, the way he subtly undermined her confidence. She remembered the bruises, the small injuries she had convinced herself were accidents. All of it now made sense. Emily sat in silence, the laptop screen glowing in the dark, as a mix of fear and resolve settled over her. She couldn't confront him, not yet. Mark was unpredictable. He had the charm to make anyone believe in his innocence, the influence to manipulate anyone who questioned him. She needed evidence. She needed a plan. For the next few days, Emily observed him carefully. She recorded conversations discreetly, documented incidents of controlling behavior, and kept detailed notes. Every smile, every argument, every small controlling act was noted. She even kept a secret stash of copies of her prenatal records, the ultrasound photos, and the notes from Dr. Harris. One afternoon, while Mark was at work, Emily revisited the court documents. She found an old, sealed restraining order. It had been lifted under mysterious circumstances, but it confirmed the pattern. Mark had been investigated for abuse before. Someone else had suffered the same fear, the same manipulation, the same subtle terror that Emily now felt every day. Her stomach twisted. She realized that her pregnancy had triggered something, his controlling tendencies, his darker impulses. This wasn't about love. This was about control, and now the stakes were higher than ever. She had to act. For the first time, Emily allowed herself to imagine leaving. Not as a fantasy, but as a real possibility. She could see herself filing for divorce, protecting her unborn child, and reclaiming her life. It wouldn't be easy. It might even be dangerous. But the alternative, staying silent, staying trapped, was unimaginable. That night, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She felt a mixture of horror, grief, and determination. The man she had trusted with her life might be the very person trying to destroy it. And yet, for the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. She was no longer blind. She could see the truth. The betrayal was complete, the mask removed, and the perfect marriage she had believed in crumbled before her eyes. But Emily also realized something powerful. Knowing the truth was the first step toward freedom, and she intended to take every step necessary to survive. Emily learned to wear her mask better than ever. By day, she smiled at Mark, laughed at his jokes, and acted like the devoted, expectant wife she had always been. By night, she meticulously planned her escape. Every conversation, every glance, every interaction was a rehearsal in restraint. She couldn't let him suspect that she had discovered the truth. Mark had not noticed the subtle changes in Emily's demeanor, though her eyes sometimes lingered longer on the door than before or flicked nervously to her phone. He had no idea she had been documenting everything, recording conversations, logging controlling behaviors, and keeping a secret folder of her medical records, ultrasound images, and Dr. Harris's notes. She had arranged a meeting with a lawyer under the guise of a prenatal legal consultation, careful to schedule it while Mark was at work. She had found a safe location where she could hide if he discovered her departure. Every detail had to be perfect. One slip could ruin everything. The days were a delicate balancing act. Emily prepared dinner, asked Mark about his day, and even initiated affectionate gestures. Mark, unaware, praised her for her thoughtfulness and told friends how lucky he was to have such a perfect wife. Every word felt like a trap in her mind, a reminder of what she had to avoid. But tension was growing, subtle and sharp. Mark's charm began to slip in small, almost imperceptible ways. He questioned her about errands she ran, scrutinized phone calls, and lingered in rooms where she least expected him. Emily noticed his eyes, the way they narrowed when she left a small smudge on a dish, or the way his tone shifted when she tried to assert herself. Each incident reminded her why she had to be careful. One evening, Mark asked softly, "Emily, are you happy?" His gaze was fixed on her, searching for some hint of weakness. She smiled, hiding the panic rising in her chest. "Of course," she replied. "I'm happy. Very happy." He nodded, but Emily felt the question hang in the air, loaded with suspicion. She realized that the closer she got to freedom, the more danger she invited. Every day she pretended to be compliant. She was playing with fire. During her secret moments, Emily called Dr. Harris to update him, though she never spoke while Mark was around. The doctor's calm, reassuring voice gave her strength. "You're doing the right thing," he said. "Stay careful, plan methodically, and trust yourself. You've already survived what most women don't even see coming." Emily's resolve strengthened. She began setting aside finances, quietly moving money to accounts only she could access. She packed small bags with essentials and hid them in discreet locations, just in case she had to leave abruptly. Every small act was calculated for survival. Mark, meanwhile, became increasingly paranoid, though he did not know why. His control, once confident and steady, wavered. He asked questions about neighbors, about Emily's outings, about friends she had spoken to. Emily answered lightly, always smiling, but each question reminded her that the storm was approaching. One night, she narrowly avoided discovery. Mark entered the bedroom unexpectedly while she was reviewing notes on her phone. She froze, holding the device under her pillow. He tilted his head, suspicious, but said nothing. Emily forced a laugh and snuggled under the covers, pretending she had been reading a prenatal article online. His eyes lingered for a moment, and then he turned away. Emily exhaled slowly once he was gone. That near miss reminded her just how fragile her safety was. One wrong move could ruin everything. One slip could cost her freedom or worse. But with each day, her plan became more solid, more precise. She knew when to speak, when to smile, when to act obediently, and when to retreat into the shadows. She had learned to navigate the dangerous waters of Mark's control with the skill of a strategist. And all the while, in the quiet moments, Emily imagined the day she would finally take her life back. The day she would leave the man who had betrayed her trust, reclaim her body, protect her unborn child, and show the world the truth behind the perfect mask. That day was coming. The morning sun streamed through the blinds, but Emily didn't notice. Her focus was absolute. Today was the day she had been preparing for, the day when months of fear, meticulous planning, and silent observation would finally pay off. Today, she would reclaim her life. Mark kissed her goodbye, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. "Don't forget to pick up the prenatal vitamins," he said cheerfully, adjusting his tie. Emily smiled, holding back a shiver. He had no idea how close he had come to losing everything. She waited until he left, then slipped into her car, careful not to let the neighbors see. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She drove to the lawyer's office she had chosen weeks ago, one with experience in domestic abuse and discreet protective measures. The lawyer, a stern but compassionate woman named Rachel, greeted her and ushered her into a private conference room. Emily laid out her evidence, the old restraining order she had found, the documented controlling behavior, the audio recordings, and even the nurse's note from Dr. Harris. Rachel listened carefully, nodding, occasionally jotting down notes. "This is very strong," Rachel said finally. "You've documented everything meticulously. We can file immediately, and I'll request protective measures to ensure your safety and your child's." Emily exhaled, relief mixed with fear. She had planned every step, but the reality of taking action brought a new intensity. Her eyes flicked to the window, imagining Mark driving home, oblivious, his life about to unravel. By the afternoon, the divorce papers were filed. Emily had requested full custody of the child, restraining orders, and immediate legal protections. She returned home quietly, pretending nothing had changed. Waiting for Mark to return from work. When he walked through the door, Emily smiled and asked about his day. He seemed distracted, but she maintained her mask of normalcy. Then the calls started. First, law enforcement. Then, notifications of the court filings. Mark's charm evaporated instantly. His perfectly crafted image shattered in private moments. He tried to approach Emily, but she calmly explained the legal protections in place. "You can't come near me," she said softly but firmly. He stared at her, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing. "Emily, what? What is this?" Emily remained calm. "This is the truth," she said. "For the first time, you can't manipulate it or hide it. I've gathered everything. Your past, your control, your abuse, it's all documented. And now it's all coming to light." Mark's face twisted in anger and disbelief. He shouted, but the sound was hollow against the weight of legal authority. He couldn't intimidate her. He couldn't charm her. And for the first time, Emily felt empowered. The process wasn't easy. Former victims came forward, corroborating Emily's findings. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues began to see cracks in Mark's carefully curated persona. The man who had seemed flawless in public was now exposed for what he truly was: manipulative, controlling, and dangerous. Emily watched it all unfold quietly, without gloating, without violence. Her revenge wasn't about anger, it was about justice. She had waited, planned, and acted carefully. Every document, every recording, every hidden note had been part of a strategy to dismantle the illusion of Mark's perfection. The court proceedings were tense. Mark tried to argue, to charm the judge, to cast doubt on Emily's credibility. But her evidence was overwhelming. Every subtle pattern, every documented instance of control, Every prior case he had tried to cover up now supported her claim. When the final judgment came, Emily felt a mixture of relief and triumph. Mark lost custody rights, faced legal consequences, and his reputation crumbled. The man who had once seemed untouchable was now powerless. Emily didn't celebrate with shouting or confrontation. Instead, she went home, cradled her growing belly, and felt a profound sense of liberation. She had survived, protected her child, and ensured that justice would follow. For the first time in months, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future without fear. The storm that had hung over her life was finally passing, and the sun felt warm on her skin again. Her revenge had been quiet, precise, and unrelenting, but most importantly, it had been effective. She had proven that strength wasn't about violence or rage. It was about courage, preparation, and action. The hospital was quiet that early morning, bathed in the soft glow of sunrise streaming through the windows. Emily sat in her recliner, her hands resting on her swollen belly, breathing slowly and deliberately. The past months felt like a lifetime compressed into weeks of fear, careful planning, and quiet rebellion. Weeks that had transformed her from a frightened, uncertain wife into a woman who had reclaimed her life. She glanced at the monitor beside her bed, imagining the moment when she would finally meet her child. It was surreal to think that, despite everything, a new life was growing inside her, a life she had fought to protect from the very person who had once threatened it. Dr. Harris had come by earlier, his calm presence a quiet anchor in the whirlwind of her thoughts. He smiled softly at her, eyes filled with warmth and understanding. "You did it, Emily," he said quietly. "You faced the truth, prepared carefully, and protected yourself. That takes more courage than most people will ever know." Emily returned his smile, a mixture of gratitude and relief. "You saved me," she whispered. "I wouldn't have realized. I wouldn't have survived if you hadn't warned me." Dr. Harris shook his head gently. "You saved yourself. I just gave you the information you needed. You were brave enough to act." As the morning passed, Emily reflected on everything she had endured. The ultrasound that had seemed like a routine appointment had revealed far more than the life growing inside her. It had revealed a truth she had been blind to for years. The signs had always been there, hidden behind Mark's charm, masked by the perfection he projected. But now she could see clearly. The divorce, the restraining orders, and the exposure of Mark's past had been the hard, necessary steps to ensure her safety. Watching him crumble in court, stripped of his public image and unable to manipulate anyone, had been a silent form of revenge. Not violent, not loud, but precise, permanent, and just and now. With her child about to arrive, Emily finally felt the full weight of freedom. She had survived fear. She had survived betrayal. She had taken back control of her body, her life, and her future. Labor came in the late morning, fast and intense. Emily gritted her teeth through each contraction, remembering the months of preparation, of careful planning, of quiet courage. Every breath, every surge of pain was a reminder of her strength. She was no longer the frightened woman who had walked out of Dr. Harris's office weeks ago. She was a mother, a survivor, a warrior in her own right. When the first cries of her newborn filled the room, Emily felt tears streaming down her face. A tiny, perfect life, safe and untouched, wrapped in a soft blanket. She held her child close, marveling at the miracle she had fought so hard to protect Dot in the days that followed. Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The fear, the uncertainty, the careful navigation of danger, it had all led to this moment. She realized that the ultrasound hadn't just revealed a child. It had revealed the truth hiding in plain sight. And that truth, terrifying as it had been, had saved her life. Emily began building a new life. She moved into a safe home with her child, surrounded by supportive friends and family. She returned to work when she was ready, reclaiming independence and control over her future. Mark was gone from her life, stripped of power and influence, unable to touch her or her child. And most importantly, Emily learned the greatest lesson of all. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. Courage was acting despite it, planning despite uncertainty, and facing the truth even when it hurt. As she watched her baby sleep, Emily felt a profound sense of peace. The nightmare was over. The betrayal had been exposed. The mask had been removed. And in its place, she had a future built on truth, safety, and freedom. For the first time in years, she smiled without hesitation, without fear. Her life and the life of her child were finally hers. And this time, nothing could take that away.